I was going to ask about that, taking off my mask. Well, welcome this morning. For those of you who are here in the room, it's lovely to see your faces. And for those of you who are listening and watching throughout the rest of the building, welcome to worship as well. And we're glad to have you with us. It's a particular blessing this morning to be driving down in the midst of the sunrise. I don't get to see that at my house because across the street, the houses and trees are too tall. I just noticed that the sky is getting lighter, but I actually got to see all the brilliant reds and oranges on the way down this morning. So aside from the blessing of being here with you, you also afforded me the blessing of watching the sunrise this morning. I was a little sad that I missed the lunar eclipse, though. Well, my name is Torin Eikler. I am the district executive for Northern Indiana. Have completed 8 years there now, which is amazing to me. And so when I come down here, it leaves my wife at home to get all three of our sons off to school. Our oldest is 16 now and manages himself, but the other two require some gentle guidance to get them out the door and to school on time. She messaged me when I got here and said that they actually got off early today, which was very unusual for our family. So it's good to be back with you. It's, I think, been 6 months. I usually come in May and in November. So although Cheryl, I guess, was here yesterday, Cheryl Thomas, who just retired from Lincolnshire, and just got to be with her not too long ago, too. So sounds like you're getting some good folks in to preach. I'm going to start off by reading a couple of scriptures. There are 2 Psalms that I think you might recognize. And then I'll share my thoughts on that. And then we will be singing. It might be a new hymn to you. It's called Shepherd Me, O God. It's in your hymnal. It's number 519. If you like to get those things ready ahead of time, but I'll remind you later. It's just a simple refrain, and I'll sing the verses. So this one is Psalm 23. Which I think may be one of the most familiar psalms in the world. This is the NIV. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And this is Psalm 139, which I won't read all of because it's really long. O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, that I know full well. My frame was not hidden from you when it was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Those are 2 of the scripture verses that have been lodged in my head since I was a child. All those Bible studies and Sunday schools where we had to memorize verses, these are 2 of them. I suppose they wanted us to know them, to hold on to them, so we could always have them to comfort us. And I recently read that as we start to forget things, which I'm starting to do, now. I'm sure it will only get more atrocious as time goes on. But as we start to forget facts and things like that, that what we hold on to are music and scriptures. And so Psalms are particularly good for that because they are musical scriptures. So I suspect, well, let's just see. How many of you memorized these scriptures in your life and carry them with you? There you go. That's great. Usually I have to assign homework for people to learn them afterward, but you all know them. That's wonderful. And it's also probably not surprising. What is surprising to me, well, not to me, but maybe to you, is that these Psalms have never really given me comfort in my life. I especially this 139, I just don't like. And the reason for that, well, in order to explain that, I have to tell you a little bit of my background and my baptism. When I was 12 and we were living in Springfield, Ohio, we had Sunday school class and we decided to do a Brethren Heritage unit. So for 8 weeks, we studied about the origins of the church, and we studied about the beliefs that we have, and we studied about how the church is organized, and we studied the ordinances, baptism and communion and anointing, feet washing. I loved that class. It was wonderful. And we didn't talk about the big words, but it really gave me a good foundation for studying theology and ecclesiology, the way the church is structured, when I got to seminary, and has served me well since then. What I didn't know, and you may have figured out, was that this was actually a membership class. And I'm sure that the teacher told us that on the first week, but my family was traveling that week, so I missed it. So I just got 7 weeks of really great learning about history and beliefs and practices of the Church of the Brethren. And on the last day, at the end of class, the teacher said, okay, baptisms are in 2 weeks. And I started to freak out because I had just spent that day, we had spent that day talking about how the Church of the Brethren believes that baptism is for adults who have developed a faith and are ready to commit themselves to be disciples, followers of Jesus. And 3 weeks before that, we had talked about how the early church had suffered for their beliefs, had been imprisoned, had been forced to move, some were even killed. We talked a little bit about the martyr's mirror, which was really strange in a Church of the Brethren because that's Mennonite martyrs. And I was surprised to think back on it that my Sunday school teacher knew about that book. We also talked about modern day folks like Ted Studebaker, who was my mom's second cousin. So it was really close to home. And he died during BBS in Asia, trying to follow his faith. So I heard that news and I was like, wait a minute, I'm not an adult. I'm not an adult yet. I didn't feel like an adult. I'm certainly not ready to make this commitment if it means I might go to prison or even be killed. So surprise wasn't really my feeling there. It was more of terror. But that Sunday school teacher had the presence of mind and the grace to have written out on note cards all 6 of our names. There were only 6 of us in that class. And she handed them out to us along with a pen. And she said, just write yes or no on the back and hand it back to me. I was grateful for that. So I wrote no in capital letters with 3 exclamation points and 4 underlines. And I handed it to her. And within seconds, I was sitting in the pew where my family always sat. And my parents couldn't find me because they never thought to look for me where I was supposed to be. I never went to that pew on my own. And 2 weeks later, when it was baptism Sunday, 4 of the 6 of us in that class got baptized. Now, it's really interesting that the 2 of us ended up in seminary together later. But the 4 who did got baptized, and I was impressed when I watched them giving their vows and being baptized by Pastor Andrew Wright. And I was a little worried about what people might be thinking about me since I wasn't getting baptized. But at least I wasn't the only one who didn't get baptized. And my overwhelming emotional response to it was just a sense of relief not to have done that, because now I could say no to God. I couldn't say no to my parents, but I could say no to God. I didn't have to answer that call when it came. And that feeling of being trapped, of being forced into something I wasn't ready to do, I've always related to this psalm and to that section I just read, not the part about being fearfully and wonderfully made or being well known, but the part where it says, no matter where I go, I can't get away from you. No matter where I go, your right hand will hold me tight. Will be trapped and held by God, and there's no way to get out of it. That was a threat to me, not a comfort. And it has been for years and years and years. And it bleeds over, like other things do, into some other scriptures. So my mom had a really bad experience with mussels in the south of France once, years and years, decades ago. And she got sick, and now she can hardly sit at the table if I order mussels without getting sick. She just has that visceral memory of that connection. And she struggles to eat clams and oysters because of that experience with mussels. And so Psalm 23, God is always there. God's rod and staff are not comforting to me, or they weren't, because of the bleed over from this psalm and that experience into other scriptures. So that's been rough, especially because working as a chaplain in other places, at funerals, a lot of people choose to have Psalm 23 read at a funeral, and it's supposed to be comforting for other people, but it's not comforting for me when I'm trying to offer comfort or a message. So that's been the story of my life with these Psalms. Until recently, and I'm not quite sure what changed, but I just recognized it last month that it changed. I was on sabbatical for a month, and part of that sabbatical, I got to travel for a week in California. So I flew out to California, and I spent a day at Yosemite National Park, hiking in the trees and up to a waterfall at, 8,000 feet. And then the next day I spent in fasting and prayer in Death Valley. And then I finished up with a half a day at Sequoia National Park, where the largest tree in the world is. Not the tallest, not the biggest around, but the most cubic feet of wood. If you made a 1 foot by 1 foot beam out of it, it would go 10 miles in one tree, which was amazing. And it might not surprise you, since I was going to Death Valley, that Psalm 23 came into my mind. And actually, I didn't plan it, but it follows my trip. Right? So I went into the meadows and by the still waters first, and then I went into the valley of death, and then I came back to the place where these towering trees make it feel like a temple, the dwelling place of God. At first, I was annoyed a little bit that it came into my head because of that. And then I realized that it wasn't bothering me, that it was inspiring me for the first time, that I was feeling that sense of comfort. You have to also understand that I had planned this trip to be, my dream for it was to be 3 months traveling all over the world. I don't have that much money. And my plan for it was to be 3 weeks, driving down the West Coast, visiting all different places to experience different experiences of the level of water. This is how I experience the Spirit of God's presence. It's like either it's really dry, or it's misty, or it's so abundant that you start to grow mold if you're not careful on your shoes. I suppose your body too. And that got shrunk down because my wife switched jobs and didn't have any flexibility anymore. So it got shrunk down, not even to a week, but just to 3 days. I was very disappointed because I really wanted something different. And then when I started my drive to Yosemite, I discovered that there was road construction. And so instead of an hour, it took me 2 hours to get there, which was annoying because it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I had envisioned in my mind. The next day, when I went to go into Death Valley, the woman at the motel where I was staying warned me that they had had record rainfall in August and September. And so Death Valley had flooded, and the roads had been washed out. So half the park was closed, and the entrance from the west, which is where I was coming, was still closed. It's a 5-hour drive around Death Valley National Park. It's the second largest national park there is. So I went on the website and looked, and sure enough, I found that they had opened a little road. They'd cleared a little road that's more of an access road. It's 1-lane dirt road that runs through twisty canyons and has potholes and all sort of stuff. And I don't know what you do if you met somebody coming the other way, but I got to go in that way. And it only took me 2 hours and a half to get in that way instead of 1.5 to get in the way I was planning to, but way better than 5 to go all the way around. So I got to spend my time there. And then when I went to Sequoia National Park, everything was going perfectly, except that there was an accident in the middle of the park. It's only one road. It's a 2-lane road, and there had been an accident where people were staring at the big trees and had drifted across the line and hit each other. And the only way to clear it is to get somebody with a wrecker to come all the way up that big, long, windy road and then all the way back out. Nobody was hurt, but I had to wait for 2 hours, an hour and a half in the car because there was no other way to go. I didn't like that either because I didn't get to spend as much time in the trees hiking. It wasn't what I had planned. It was a bit of a surprise. What all this time and what this psalm helped me to understand, though, is something that I had forgotten years ago. And that is that it's not what we do or what we plan that puts us in touch with God. God is there. It's paying attention to the fact that God is there. It's realizing that anywhere we go, God is with us. And so, on my trip, I didn't get to go everywhere I wanted to go, but I got to see a waterfall that was still running in Yosemite. And at this time of year, most of them don't. I got to see the horses come up and down the trail, which I wouldn't have done if I'd have been there on time. When I went to Death Valley, I got to go through that little road and see a family of partridges run down the road and startle up into the air, which I wouldn't have seen. And I would never have seen the canyons up that close. And all the beautiful colors in the rocks, or the sunrise as it started to dip down into the valley where I was. There were amazing things to experience. And it wasn't what I wanted. It's what I got, and it was better. And so this psalm started to flow through my head as I was hiking along the ridge line of the sand dunes. There are sand dunes in Death Valley, in case you didn't know that. And I struggled a little bit to remember it, but I just used it as a prayer for that walk. And it became really meaningful for me in a way that it hasn't before. And this is renewal and transformation. It's regeneration it's the gift of life flowing up from within me through these experiences. And that's what faith is about. It's about knowing, identifying, living with God's presence wherever we are. It's about inviting God in to be with us, which brings us new life, brings us transformation. It brings us challenges. It brings us growth. That's comforting, even when we're stuck in the midst of hard things like has been going on in the Church of the Brethren for the last 3 or 4 years, even when we're disappointed because we're not getting what we want. God's there with us. God's comforting us. Presence comforts us, even when there are people around us we don't want to be with, people we feel like, well, you might say strongly our enemies, and we're called to love them, which is challenging. But it's a gift that God is with us and with them all the time. It makes it a little bit easier. At the end of my time walking in Death Valley, hiking, which you're not supposed to do after 10 a.m. because it's too hot, but I did it anyway. It was only 98 degrees when I was there, not 120. This song that we're about to sing started to run in my mind. I didn't know all the verses quite as well as I do now, but the refrain just kept going over and over. It became my prayers. I would sing it with each step along the way, sometimes out loud, mostly in my head. So this is a hymn. It's 519 in your hymnal. And you guys, unless you already know the verses, I expect you're just going to sing the refrain, which Nan will play for us. And I'll do my best to sing the verses for you. It's a setting of the Lord's Prayer, not the Lord's Prayer, Psalm 23, that was written by Marty Hagen some years ago, about 40 years ago now, almost. Go ahead. It's 519. Sorry, they were asking what number it was.
519?
Yeah, it's 519 in the blue hymnal. Be, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. God is my shepherd, so nothing shall I want. I rest in the meadows of faithfulness and love. I walk by the quiet waters of peace. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Gently you raise me and heal my weary soul. You lead me by pathways of righteousness and truth. My spirit shall sing the music of your name. Be, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Though I should wander the valley of death, I fear no evil, for you are at my side. Your rod and your staff, my comfort and my hope. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, death into life. You have set me a banquet of love in face of hatred, crowning me with love beyond my power to hold. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Surely your kindness and mercy follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of my God forevermore. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my fears, beyond my fears, from death to life. So, this experience has taken away my fear of being in the presence of God in a way that I haven't experienced in, I'm going to say, 35 years now. It's such a blessing, and I'm so glad to have been able to share with you. And my prayer for you all as we leave here, as we go into this day and the days coming forward, is that you will also find God shepherding you beyond fears, beyond wants, into life. Go in peace.